What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I'm RB3.
And I'm Sabrina.
And we are here talking about a genre that I very much care about. One of my favorite, I think actually my favorite genre in all of cinema, noir. It's an exciting conversation I'm ready to have with Sabrina. Sabrina, what's your familiarity with the noir genre? And you know, when we're talking about noir, we're kind of mainly talking about the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, black and white, like American, detective dramas that we saw a lot of. Do you have a lot of familiarity with the genre, or is this something you're kind of like whatever about?
It's one that I never really dove into as I was growing up, and I never went to film school, so I wasn't kind of shown things that I didn't seek out myself. And I remember one of the first conversations you and I ever had, you talked about how noir was your favorite genre. So once you brought this up as a topic, I was super excited. I'm very familiar with it. I'm more familiar with neo-noir, which owes obviously 100% of its birth to noir. But yeah, so what I do know about neo-noir or noir, like people really hail like the late 30s, 40s, 50s as the classic period for the genre. And diving into it a little bit deeper, it really is a product of its time. And I think it's something that encapsulates those decades very beautifully. We see a lot of the similar like motifs and tropes and things like that we see in cinema today. And it all kind of started here. And then of course we have like directors who are known for their noir. And it's just a very beautiful aesthetic and style and kind of way of storytelling that's super intoxicating. And it's kind of a shame that I went so long of my life like without really diving into the genre. So I'm super excited to talk about it with you today.
Yeah, no, I think to me that's kind of what makes this genre so interesting, is how much of a reflection of the time period that it's representing of. And by the way, we're talking about noir today, mostly because Netflix has been doing this whole like noir or NOIRvember thing I've been seeing on Twitter, where they're highlighting like their like noir films that they have on their platform. And I was going through HBO Max and I was looking, and they actually have a pretty good collection of stuff there too for their I think it was I forget exactly what it's called, their service. TCM?
TCM? Yeah.
TCM, yes. Turner Classic Movies, yeah. You go there to Turner Classic Movies collection, they actually have like a good collection of noir and a good collection of neo-noir too. So I thought it would be kind of fun to kind of highlight the genre. And, it's definitely something, when I talk about time period, right, and we talk about the late 30s, early 40s, that was a time period that experienced like a lot of like hardships, particularly the Depression, right? The pre-war kind of era where there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. There was a lot of doubt and anxiety and hope and hopelessness, frankly, especially leading into that led into World War II later on down the line, which also created a higher kind of priority and this kind of like seemingly more strenuous representation of like this war torn or this post-war man and masculinity. And that's kind of what noir kind of dives into really deeply. I think when you look at the genre and you look at like the kind of tropes that it encompasses, the themes of a lot of times you see it's about money is at stake, money's being taken, money's being stolen. I think it reflected the panic of the Great Depression during that time period. Same thing with this kind of post-war cinema that we saw a lot of during that time, that kind of had this strenuous relationship with women and female characters, this creation of the femme fatale, and how there's kind of this anxiety that women are taking back society, especially in the war and World War II periods, where it was pre-war and during World War II, where men were seen as like the dominant masculine force because they went out and fought for war. But then when they came home and women started to have more of a presence in the household, it created a lot of discomfort amongst American men. And, that's reflected in the cinema. And I think that's reflected through a lot of the representation we see here. But then it's also reflective of a very unique style too. Like that's kind of what I love the most about it. The very stark black and white, harsh shadows. And a lot of the visual style of noir actually came from cinematographer John Otten. He's actually the creator of that image that we're using for the thumbnail right now. Those iconic shots of two characters standing on the dock, and it's real foggy, and you just see their silhouettes.
The light
Just the way the light
down.
hits. Or when you're sitting in a detective's office and the blinds are cutting through their face in a certain kind of way. All those iconic kind of imageries is something that I kind of really appreciate, and it derives from a lot of different pieces of cinema. Like German Expressionism is the big one that it comes from, which we talked about on our horror episode. Me and Andres, one of our first episodes, we talked about genre, how much German Expressionism kind of heightened like fear and tension and a particular like cinema and thematics. And that's what, noir kind of incorporated, along with the rising crime genre that was kind of festering in America, which was also the crime genre that was kind of growing, was also a result of prohibition, right? Like the whole banning alcohol, the gangsters, all of that. So all these very unique, specific American factors all went into, from incorporating these foreign styles of cinema with the real world anxieties of depression, prohibition, and post-war masculinity, all kind of formed this really unique and kind of special genre that is really, I think, reflective of its time period. It kind of has a look. It kind of has like this weird, like nightmarish feel. Like you kind of feel like you want to it's crawling under your skin when you're watching it. But at the same time, it's like witty characters and fun dialogue and a cool twist. So I don't know. That's why it's one of my favorite genres. So.
Do this entire episode by yourself. That was so beautiful, so eloquent. I need to hear a TED talk about you just going on about noir. You took a lot of the words out of my mouth. We're seeing, like I said, a product of its time. We're coming off of prohibition. There's those crime fiction, which many of the noir films are derived from. That's a result of romanticizing crime, romanticizing corruption, because the country was kind of laced with crime and corruption, in the 1940s and 50s, Great Depression, all of that really encapsulates what these films, how they came to be, basically. And it's really, really interesting, especially when we talk about how most of the time it takes place, like you said, it crawls under your skin. It takes place in cities like LA, New York, Chicago, a lot of the times very popular, thriving urban cities, and really shows the kind of like seedy underbellies of it and the grittiness and the dirtiness. And that's why it crawls under your skin, based from the aesthetics, like everything, even the characters. Like you talked about the femme fatale. It's, it's kind of like, it's a dangerous woman. Like it's someone that is to be feared. And same thing with kind of our protagonists. They're always morally ambivalent. Like they're never on one side necessarily. They're not good. They're not bad. They're right in between. And that's really interesting. It's really interesting to see a story when you're not necessarily 100% rooting for the protagonist, because that their morality is very, very gray. So I really love that. I love the detective private eye aspect of it. That's why I said this genre is like intoxicating, because you get taken on a ride visually. Like it's just stunning. The dialogue, like you said, so quick, so witty. It's really, really interesting. And so everything you said, I second.
Sorry, I guess I did say a lot there, my bad.
Oh,
but
no, I love it.
We could talk about a lot of these things, like, in reference to like, modern day cinema, right? Like how, in modern day cinema, we kind of see a lot of the anxieties of, now we're talking a lot about class and cinema, and we're talking a lot about race and film, because those are the things that are permeating our minds and our fears and our nightmares, in our horror movies. And you see that change in a lot of horror too. I think that's why Jordan Peele has become like so popular, like over recent times, because it's horror that addresses something. Same thing with the A24 and the movement of elevated horror. And I think that's what, noir kind of experienced. I think it was around 1940, 1940s, 1942, 1943-ish is when noir started to be taken like more seriously and started to be seen more as an A genre. And a lot of that was actually due to Alfred Hitchcock. He even though his films aren't necessarily noir per se, and he actually probably came after noir. His popularity kind of popped off a little bit after noir was kind of like fully fleshed out as a genre. But I think like the whole mystery and the prestige and all of that, the precision of the thriller genre, I think definitely thrived based on Hitchcock. And I think he kind of changed the genre for a lot of, I think he took elements of noir, ended up transmitting that into what we consider like the modern day thriller. But it was before and during that time, noir films have always been like super low budget. So like it's always kind of been like solo characters, like one individual character. And it kind of ended up leading to like the kind of like archetype of like the anti-hero, like the detective who's going to go out there and he's going to like rough some people up and he's going to get answers. He's not going to take no crap or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think, that's one part of the genre that I've always kind of found kind of ironic, because even though he's like a lot of times they're quote unquote hard boiled, a lot of times they're alcoholics and like heavy smokers. But they don't, obviously like very misogynistic and all that. But, there's kind of like this, like we talked about a little bit, like this wittiness to like the dialogue, like a lot of times. And that was a lot of what old Hollywood was. That's a lot of what, the older movies kind of had, with their screenwriting and whatnot. But kind of having that like mismatch of like the cinematic, like over the top, like ish dialogue with like the gritty conditions of the reality they're portraying, and using all these stylistic choices like Dutch angles or what people say are Dutch angles. Again, expressive uses of film technique to like really create like a form and a vision and express something, but it kind of makes it really scary and makes it really like nasty looking. So I think it has like this weird and interesting contrast between like funny, but also not like funny, also very like rough and gritty and like unsettling. I think that also adds to like the flavor of the genre too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really what makes up noir. It is that quickness, that wit, mixed with the mystery and the thrill that comes with it, and obviously all of the like motifs and everything that we've talked about. It's something interesting because it's stuff that's so prevalent nowadays. We see it a little bit of everywhere, even not just in neo-noir, just other films, something that's a mystery or a thriller. We might have a lot of those elements, and it's still very, very prevalent in cinema today.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a large reason why the genre's kind of stuck around through a lot of time. Is I think it's been parodied so many times over and over. But I think even if you watch a lot of modern movies that aren't necessarily noir films, but have like noir influences, I think of like Breaking Bad. There's a lot of shots in Breaking Bad that like look like they come directly from noir.
Well, I just watched Fincher's Seven, and that very much so. As we were on this discussion, I'm like, that's 100%. It's a mystery thriller, but it takes so much influence. It's very evident that it takes influence from noir.
Absolutely. And what the directors that kind of shaped noir, like I said, Hitchcock maybe popularized it and definitely took influence from it. And then I also want to shout out the German director Fritz Lang, who kind of popularized German expressionism to American audiences with his first film, not his first film, but one of his bigger films, and then kind of ended up directing film noir later on down the line. And also Anthony Mann is also a big noir director who ended up doing a lot of Westerns later on. John Hudson, who directed The Maltese Falcon, which is widely considered to be one of the first noir films and highly shaped the genre. And then Billy Wilder, of course, director of Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, which are kind of two of the most famous noir films, I would say. A lot of people, regard those as highly acclaimed. I think Double Indemnity, you see a lot of the noir archetypes like through and through, right? Like the idea of this guy who is he just stumbles into like this beautiful woman who persuades him to involve him in this plot to murder her husband for the insurance, and but things are, things go left and things aren't going, the twists and turns, what side is she on, what side is he on, that kind of will they, won't they, tension between what's the actual character's motivation, like you said, added to that moral complexity of what, who you should believe in, who you should follow, who's the protagonist worth following. And I think on top of that, I think on top of that, on top of having that like dual split, like character decision, you also sympathize a little bit with the main character because, again, during this time period, it was post depression, post war, literally just getting out of depression. When the motivation is money, it's a lot more understandable for people to get behind. So I don't know, what are your
right at that point of the American dream. It's that idea of working really hard and doing whatever you can to survive and continue to like thrive, and work your way up. So yeah, in that situation, for sure, we understand those kind of motivations, even if we don't necessarily agree. And I think that's what makes a really great antihero. Like, but for Double Indemnity, I absolutely love this film. Billy Wilder is one of my favorite directors. Of course, the director of Sabrina, the movie I was named after.
Yeah.
That's just coincidence that I like it. I'm not biased, I swear. But two really great films, like you said, Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard. Double Indemnity is like the film that I think of when I think of noir, basically. And, just because the sharp dialogue, the narrative structure that I think is so interesting within this film. And yeah, that entire moral gray area. We are not necessarily rooting for anyone, even though we empathize with it. And that like femme fatale dynamic, I think, is so flawless in this film because not only is she convincing him to do like investigate a case or do something like that, it's to commit a real crime, not just any kind of detective work. It's something really interesting, 100% for her own sake, because she wants to collect this money. And it's really, really great. And that's one that I would highly recommend to anybody if they're trying to kind of dive into noir. I think this is a really great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we look at his later film, Sunset Boulevard, which has always been one of my favorites. I think that's one I saw, I think right before I went to film school, because I think I was like, oh, I gotta at least watch like one like black and white movie before I go. So I watched that one. I actually like really ended up liking this one. I think it perfectly exudes like the other aspect, even though it's not necessarily a detective film, and it's not necessarily like a murder. Well, there is a murder at play, which you see at the beginning, but it's not necessarily like about police or about crime or things like that. It's more about just the straight up just more about the straight up descent into madness that the genre kind of emphasizes, right? And it kind of uses like the Hollywood framework to do that. I'm sorry if I stole what you're gonna say. Something, but.
Oh no, you're good. That's exactly what I was gonna say. That's what makes this one different, because it's really just Hollywood. It's washed up screenwriter. It's a silent film star who believes that her stardom is over. There's a lot of interesting elements, and it goes to that other side of Hollywood, other side of Los Angeles that we don't always see. Hollywood is so glamorized. It's like, at the end of the day, especially in this time period, with the way actors were kind of treated, the way the film industry was going, we're seeing these kind of stories that aren't necessarily brought to light. And it's definitely more on the drama side of a noir. And I enjoy it for that reason. I think it tells a very compelling story. The direction, the cinematography, it's iconic.
No, 100%. Like it's definitely, I think, one of the to me, I think is one of the standout it's one of the standout noir films, and I think I think it also perfectly exudes like the whole like beginning with the crime, right? Like the whole starting the movie with the murder, starting the movie with the central question or the dramatic question, and then kind of flashing back and dissecting what led up to that point. Noir was kind of popular for that, and I think this movie executed that like perfectly to a T. So
yeah, it's that idea of a cold open, and it's like how do we get here? What are we doing now? And then just unraveling the story in front of our eyes.
Well, so yeah, we talked about a lot of the background of noir, and we highlighted some of our favorites and the origins of the genre. But stick around after the break. We're gonna dive deeper into the question of what defines noir. We're gonna talk about more of the individual movies, and we're just gonna explore more about the genre. So stick around and join us after.
This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. With the 4/5 divide you in half. You getting at me equals a club half. You do the math, take you out the equation.
It's a masterpiece, baby.
It's perfect. I love it. It's amazing.
It's beautiful. Baby, listen, we gotta get ready for work. Love you, baby.
What? Work? Yeah. What happened to going to the science fair? Jackie, if you don't get your...
Look, she's not answering. We gotta go.
30 seconds.
Jackie, hide!
All right, let's go save some parents.
I've seen my parents die 277 times.
I noticed on today's attempt, the gravitational field declined by 50%. And I'm worried you only have like 2 attempts left.
I might just have to go in.
Into the house. With armed robbers. It's too dangerous.
I'm not willing to waste the last 2.
Check out our new website on geeksofcolor.co/first-cut to check out our reviews, our videos, and articles that pertain to everything First Cut related. Check it out.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, y'all? We are back on the Meaning of podcast, celebrating NOIRvember, and talking about more noir films and the noir genre in general. The noir genre in general. There we go. So I guess now we're going to dig into a little bit of the question of like what specifically defines noir, because there's a lot of questions as to exactly what it encompasses, right? Like, does it encompass, does it involve the particular time period? Is it, does it have to be made between a specific time period? Does it have to represent a certain theme? What themes would those be? All that kind of stuff. So I kind of want to toss to you, Sabrina. What do you think of noir? Do you think what's the cutoff point? Like, do you think, what is like a new, like, we talk about neo-noir all the time. Do you think there's a difference? Do you think there should be a difference? Do you think that a modern movie can be considered a classic noir film?
I don't think so. To me, what I believe is noir is definitely that time period. Like we kind of said, all the things that were happening in real life are encapsulated within these films. We have these seedy settings, we have shadowy lighting, dark tones and atmospheres. And I just think that this is 100% a product of its time. I do believe like the late 30s, 40s, early 50s, that's kind of like where noir was birthed. Anything going forward, I think, even if they take elements from it, I do believe it's neo-noir. I do believe it's something different, because we even see it, like I said, in a lot of other places that aren't even necessarily just like neo-noir types of films. We see a lot of the elements, but I think even if we have a film that has like the anti-hero protagonist, a femme fatale, and it's about crime and it's in a seedy underbelly of a big city, or like a dystopian example, which would obviously be like Blade Runner 2049. I do believe that's something completely different. I think this was a launching pad and this was a foundation to people taking a lot of the elements that worked of the genre and then implementing it into their own films. Like I said with Fincher in Seven, it's definitely 100% a Fincher kind of like mystery crime film, but has so much noir elements of it. It's more honoring rather than it would be. I would not consider that to be noir because noir is so iconic. I think it's encapsulated in that time period.
No, I think 100%. I think it is. I think I think you're you hit it like right on the head. I think when you start removing like the cultural and historical context behind what makes noir, it kind of shakes it up a little bit. And I think we're going to talk about neo-noir next week, which I'm very, very excited about because that's also one of my favorite, genres, obviously because of its origins. And I think, but part of what that conversation is going to encompass is like how they incorporate different themes, right? Like we're going to talk, if we talk about Chinatown could be a noir, even though it's not black and white, but it still deals with themes of its contemporary time. But the thing is, the themes of the 70s was corruption. The themes and the fears and the anxieties that people were kind of worried about was government corruption, government oversight, and government crime, and all this kind of stuff. And that's what that movie exuded. When we talk about the French film Les Samurai, that one is a very, very much about French struggles and French poverty and all that kind of stuff. But this what noir, particularly I think from the 40s and 50s and late 30s as well, because there was noir that existed like pre-code, and pre-code noir is like actually a lot darker. It's a lot more gruesome, and it relies a lot more on. But it kind of set the tone for what we came to see, especially with the idea of like having like the woman who's like sexually attractive seduce a man into wrongdoing. That was kind of seen like early into pre-code, and they kind of dialed it back and made it a little more subtle later on. But when noir isn't necessarily about a police or a detective or anything like that, when it's about like a screenwriter, like we talked about Sunset Boulevard or Insurance Man with Double Indemnity or something else, it still kind of all floats around the same themes of depression, of crime, as a result of prohibition, like gangster crime genre that it kind of ended up spawning noir as a response. And yeah, there's this kind of like overall sense of what noir is based on where its origins from, which is America, and where the struggles that it represents. Now, that being said, though, there are films in the genre, even though they represent similar themes, there are a spectrum in the genre, I think. And I think there's some films that are on the more anti-hero side, and I think those are films that are like ones from the Big Heat or the Big Heat, or In a Lonely Place, a little bit more of a morally ambiguous kind of character. And then you have films like He Walked by Night, which is really more of a straightforward like police procedural kind of thing, which kind of highlights like what side of the fence are the noir genre was the audience interested? Were they trying to be the cop, or were they trying to be the robber? And I think noir kind of highlighted both and kind of showed the bright sides of it and the seedy underbellies of both sides. So I don't know, Sabrina, do you see any kind of noir that you kind of more favor over, or do you kind of see it as more of a monolithic kind of thing? Like,
I really enjoy a lot of it. I love the ones that deal, like you said, with the Big Heat. that one deals with so much moral corruption and paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
And I find those kinds of stories to be so compelling as they're unraveling. I like those a lot. And of course, like we said, Double Indemnity, our protagonist is not a good person. And the femme fatale character is also not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I like seeing those stories as well. I think all of it's kind of a little bit interesting because each story is so unique, even though we have this similar thing where we describe noir in the same ways. We describe it with the grittiness and everything. They take all of these ideas, motifs, and they take everything and make it so unique for each story. And that's something that I also applaud noir with. At that time period, to have one director do two great ones with Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, but then they still feel so unique, so refreshing, so different. That's the way it is as you're going into all of them. And like you said, Hitchcock, since we're talking about what noir really is, I think Hitchcock, I never really saw him as like the face of noir, but he obviously takes a lot of elements. I think he pushes it one step further and really makes it his own at the same time. But he takes a lot of those elements, and there's a lot of ones that you would just label as noir. But his filmography is so expansive. He was constantly evolving as a filmmaker. So yeah, I really like a little bit of everything. I've only had a few years to really kind of dive into this genre. I'm excited to watch a little bit more because, especially knowing the history behind it and knowing everything that was happening and how people wanted so much all the time and they were afraid of losing it in a second, like they did during the Great Depression. So then once everything coming off of Prohibition starts moving in that direction, it's like you can't stop almost. Like you're so motivated to keep going, you'll do whatever and you'll step on whoever to get to that point. It's really, really interesting. And yeah, just crediting noir for what it did for film. Like we've said it 1,000 times, so many people have said this, but this genre has expanded and evolved into everything. There is little aspects of noir in so much that we see today. Even when we talk about neo-noir, besides those films, like Under the Silver Lake, David Robert Mitchell that came out, that's 100%. We see so much noir throughout it, but it's very much a modern, current, like 2019 noir film. It's so interesting how it's gotten from the point that it was to here, even though we have all the same elements.
And I think it's apparent when you look at filmographies like Stanley Kubrick, when one of his early films was The Killing, or modern example like Rian Johnson with Brick. Noir kind of allows for directors to kind of have like this kind of like expressive vision of the world and kind of create this like nightmarish kind of reality through creating like a slightly exaggerated creation of the real world, while using the elements of filmmaking to make that differentiation like apparent. And I think that's what makes noir so brilliant. I think that's why people like Hitchcock adapted it when he came from the UK, when he came from Britain over to America. I think that's why he adapted a little bit of the noir style. And I think that's why Kubrick, used The Killing, one of his first films, as a springboard for his filmography. It was a low budget genre that you could get very, very creative with, and at the same time be very and have something amazing and unique and special that represents something deeper and thematically. So overall, that's why noir is one of my favorite genres. I'm super excited to have like spoken to you about it, Sabrina. I don't know, do you have any closing thoughts on noir? Or
yeah, I think even as interesting as the films are, I think the history behind it is even more, just seeing how much of a product of its time it is, and how a genre like that wouldn't have been the same without all of those real world elements really bleeding into it. I don't think it'd be as iconic. We can watch the films and really understand that time period, that setting. And like you said, it's exaggerated because it's based off of the real life fears that people had in this country at that time period. So I just think that's absolutely incredible. The history, the films itself, I think it all blends together really beautifully, and that's why it's still iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let us know what are your thoughts on the noir genre in the comments down below. Is it something that you enjoy? Are you looking forward to our episode next week on neo-noir? And let me pull up the list, because we did have a list of films that we're going to talk about. And just look at these films: Chinatown, Les Samurai, Nightcrawler, Taxi Driver, Blade Runner, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Sin City, Drive, Christopher Nolan's The Falling. There's another one. The director's early film. He made a black and white noir film. We're going to talk about all of that and more next week on the Meeting Up podcast. Be sure to check that out. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just straight up on Anchor. And make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel, First Cut. And Sabrina, where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sabrina X Monica, and then also on Twitter at Sabrina on Film. And then the First Cut Instagram and Twitter accounts at First Cut TMO. Be sure to check that out so you could keep up to date with our stuff. Yes, absolutely.
Be sure to check that out, y'all. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3. And if you haven't seen the trailer for Timestamp is out, is right at the top of this description. Follow our YouTube channel, Timestamp Movie, and be sure to check out the trailer there. Anyway, y'all, that has been the Meeting Up podcast. I'm RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we are peacing out. Peace out, y'all.